If you decided to read this story, I should warn you up front. You might not find much enjoyment in the reading process. I don't intend to weave intricate plots or craft overly clever dialogues. I simply want to tell this story as plainly as possible. Once I've finished, I hope my emotions will be calm. All I hope for in telling this story is to express it truthfully and accurately. Let me start from the day I went to meet Longu. That day was quite special. It was the last day of the year, December 31st, 2635. The northwest wind at this time of year was relentless. After walking against it for a while, my face turned so red it could have been used for performing ancient opera. Longu had arranged to meet at a plaza that was particularly good for catching the wind. There's a fountain in the center of the plaza, and in the fountain is a 5-faced statue of Shiva. I'll be in the direction the smiling face is looking toward, Longu had said over the phone. The whole way there, I couldn't stop thinking about Longu. He was a special character. In the past 730 days and 11 hours, he had evaded 141 ambushes, 16 defections, and 87 capture attempts. Under constant 24/7 surveillance and countless cameras scattered like stars in the sky, he and his team had repeatedly slipped through the fingers of pursuers at docks, hotels, airports, and stations, places where it's almost impossible to remain unnoticed. Each time, they transitioned smoothly and escaped unscathed. I've reviewed the pursuit records from the past 2 years. Longu's team almost always came out unscathed, while the people hunting them ended up clocking into various hospital trauma wards month after month. No one expected things to escalate like this. 2 years ago, when this game first began, all participants were cheerful and excited, full of enthusiasm. Yes, this was a game. But Longu had made everything far more complicated. The game was a high-stakes live-action escape challenge, developed and operated by the renowned Qingshi Game Company. The rules for the bounty escape game were as follows. First, contestants were selected through an open recruitment process. There were no restrictions on age, gender, or nationality. Initial applicants often numbered in the tens of thousands. However, after extensive physical exams, rigorous fitness tests, and IQ evaluations, the majority were eliminated. Next came a series of even more stringent competitive exams, narrowing the group to just 50. These 50 selected contestants then underwent 6 months of resilience and professional escape training. The top 4 performers were chosen as the final escapees. When the game began, Qingshi handed a valuable piece of jewelry to the 4 escapees, giving them a 24-hour head start to hide without being pursued or tracked. After the 24 hours, when the pursuit officially began, Qingshi activated all surveillance devices within their legal reach, and 100 seasoned professional hunters were sent out in full force. If the escapees managed to evade capture for 2 years, they would win the right to the jewelry. Qingshi Game Company was the industry leader in pursuit games. For years, they had recruited the best hunters. Initially, no one could win against them, and their shows dominated the ratings charts. Within 2 decades, the company amassed billions in assets. But soon, competitors flooded the market with their own pursuit games. The once exclusive profit margins were split among many. In response to this competition, the owner of Qingshi made a shocking decision. They boldly acquired a priceless piece of jewelry and made it the centerpiece of their latest pursuit game. The treasure was a flawless imperial green jade bracelet, purchased for a staggering 90 million. This game was subsequently named the Unbreakable Ring. Because the treasure was so valuable, Qingshi didn't hand it directly to the escapees. Instead, they deposited it in a trusted bank's vault under the supervision of public notaries the day before the game began. The escapees privately set a retrieval code for the treasure. The entire process was live-streamed as the game's opening ceremony to ensure fairness. The Unbreakable Ring had 4 locks, representing the 4 escapees. 1 lock held the real code, while the others were decoys. This meant only one person knew the true retrieval key, the true keeper of the ring. Within 2 years, even if Qingshi captured the decoy locks, it wouldn't count as a victory. They had to capture the real keeper to end the game. Once the game began, The 4 escapees' roles were to evade capture and protect the retrieval key. Meanwhile, Chingshi's employees were tasked with capturing the keeper. The entire process was streamed across major entertainment platforms to attract viewership. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Fulling, and I am the ring analyst for the Unbreakable Ring. The role of a ring analyst is Chingshi's safeguard. If the escapees successfully evade capture for 2 years, the contract stipulates that on the final day, the escapees must meet with the ring analyst for a special negotiation. If the analyst obtains the key during this meeting, the escapees are still considered to have lost. This nearly legendary position happened to fall into my hands. I love this job. As my boss, Bai Song, puts it, every time Fulling sets out for work, he has the proud and solemn expression of a ceremonial guard. Today, I left with that same expression. I arrived at the plaza Dragonbone had described, just as we had agreed, and stood under the towering 5-meter-tall statue, staring blankly for a moment. A 5-faced Shiva statue was a rare sight. Known in mythology for his disdainful demeanor and boundless power, Shiva had numerous depictions, but I had never before seen one with all 5 aspects combined. These 5 aspects, terrifying, heroic, lord of dance, androgynous, and gentle, were all merged into one. I stood before the gentle aspect. The gray-skinned statue bore a golden crescent moon on its forehead, emanating a commanding presence. Its vivid, smiling eyes gazed steadily toward the northwest corner of the plaza. Following Shiva's gaze, I spotted a small Southeast Asian-style bar about 100 meters away. The bar had cherrywood pillars at its 4 corners and a sharply pitched roof covered in red and blackfish scale tiles. Beneath a pillar entwined with a 5-colored golden dragon sat a man dressed in black. That was Dragonbone, the person I believed to be the most likely keeper of the ring. It took me a moment to walk over. Throughout, Dragonbone didn't lift his head, engrossed in a book as sunlight spilled generously across its open pages. It didn't seem like he was reading. Rather, he appeared to be basking in the radiance of that particular page. When I sat down on the chair across from him, he finally looked up. The man before me was around 30, tall and lean, with fair skin, sharply defined temples, and strikingly handsome features. He wore a black, slim-fit leather jacket, casually unzipped. My eyes involuntarily flicked to his chest muscles faintly visible beneath a gray shirt. He wasn't as skinny as he first appeared. "Analyst, I ordered tea for you," he said, looking at me without a trace of wariness. In the biting cold of midwinter, he was dressed lightly, sitting in the open square with a northwesterly wind howling around us, and he had the audacity to serve me iced mint tea. Obliging, I picked up the glass and took a sip of the freezing green liquid. The chill went straight to my lungs, making my throat spasm. Struggling to maintain a dignified tone, I said hoarsely, "You do realize I'm here to help you, right?" He looked at me earnestly. "Help us? Help us eliminate the accidents in our fate. Weren't those accidents caused by you in the first place?" He shook his head with a sigh. "What do you plan to do about it?" I replied deftly, "An analyst's role is flexible, full of possibilities. It depends on how well you cooperate. I've played this game before. I know what analysts are capable of. You excel in psychology, and most of you are skilled hypnotists who use your abilities at opportune moments." "Oh, you've played this game before?" I interrupted, surprised. "Didn't the Shiva statue in the plaza remind you of anything?" he asked, scrutinizing me. I nodded. "Yes, it reminded me of 5 years ago, the first person who ever escaped this game. 5 years ago, a woman named Shiva became the first escapee in the history of Chingshi games, breaking their perfect record. She successfully evaded capture and claimed the staggering reward." Dragonbone continued to stare at me. "That's right, Shiva. Back then, I was part of her team." I was stunned. That explains a lot. But how did such a flaw appear in Chingshi's meticulous system? Dragonbone's expression turned faintly amused. "A good question. Do you know the real purpose of your meeting me today?" His words unsettled me. Analysts had the power to terminate the game because every escapee underwent 6 months of grueling training before the chase began. Officially, this was to enhance their mental resilience and vigilance. But the true purpose of that training was to plant a hypnotic anchor in their subconscious. For Dragonbone's team, the anchor was their names. After the training, the escapees became highly volatile, suspicious, and sensitive, more prone to suggestion than the average person. When a hypnotist triggered their anchor with specific language, they could be instantly put into a trance. My mission was clear. Identify the real keeper of the ring in Dragonbone's team, use hypnosis to extract the secret, and end the game. It was a bit of a cheat, admittedly. But if they could overcome this final hurdle, they would have truly escaped. Shiva had overcome it back then. Dragonbone said quietly, "In the eyes of certain people at Qingshi, escapees are nothing more than ants. And we're just a few ants refusing to accept our fate." His bitter words stirred something unusual in me. I was about to probe further when Dragonbone suddenly turned alert, his gaze fixed on the southeast side of the bar. I followed his line of sight and saw several men approaching. Dragonbone's expression changed instantly. In a flash, he kicked my chair from underneath, sending it sliding back just as gunfire erupted. The glass in my hand shattered, scattering crushed mint leaves and ice shards everywhere. Water splashed on my face, and I fell backward in shock. Dragonbone flipped the table over to shield us as bullets rained down, shattering the bottles on the shelves behind the bar. Without hesitation, he grabbed me and ran toward the 6-meter-long solid wood bar. "Who are they?" I managed to gasp, wiping my face. "Qingshi's people," he replied. "That's impossible," I snapped, both angry and incredulous. "Why would they shoot at me?" Dragonbone gave me a wry look. "You mean they should be shooting at me instead?" Feeling awkward, I muttered. "Well, I mean, this isn't part of the protocol." "They're closing in," Dragonbone said, quickly peering out from behind the bar. Struggling to catch my breath, I started to rise. "Let me negotiate. Trust me, I can." Dragonbone suddenly grabbed my arm, his eyes gleaming. "Isn't it amazing how fate brought us here today? We've shared the sunrise, the blue sky, and now bullets." His eyes sparkled. "So, why don't we share the prize money, too?" Images of mountains of cash flashed through my mind, leaving me stunned. Do I really look like someone who's easily bribed? Without a word, Dragonbone pressed a hidden button under the bar. A section of the wooden footrest folded down, revealing a dark tunnel. I nearly jumped in shock. "What is this? Why is this even here?" Dragonbone jumped into the tunnel first, then turned and extended a hand toward me, his smile both beguiling and irresistible. "Come with me," he said. "I'll give you the truth." Although I couldn't be sure who was coming, I thought this kind of coercion wasn't conducive to resolving the situation positively. Moreover, they were seriously interfering with my work. The reason I liked this job so much was that I enjoyed the solitary process of unraveling the loops. The footsteps grew closer. I quickly reached out to grasp Longu's hand, and the platform reset itself after we jumped into the passageway. "What if they follow us into the tunnel?" I asked anxiously. The button to open the passage wasn't hard to find. "Don't worry," Longu said steadily. I soon understood the reason for his calm demeanor. Every time we turned a corner, a mechanical clicking sound came from behind us, followed by the heavy thud of something falling into place. After about 5 minutes of stumbling in the dark, Longu found an exit and led me out of the tunnel. By then, we were already in another block beyond the square. I scanned the surroundings vigilantly, ensuring there were no hidden sentries and that no one was following us. Only then did I exhale in slight relief. "Let's find a quiet place to finish our conversation." "No rush," Longu said, pointing to a beat-up Volvo not far away. "I'll take you to meet someone first." "It's not Shiva, is it?" I joked half-seriously. Longu glanced at me but didn't answer. There was a trace of tacit acknowledgement in his eyes. "It really is Shiva?" I couldn't suppress my excitement. In truth, I was more interested in Shiva than in Longu. To say she was the person I most wanted to meet would not be an exaggeration. Her entire escape process was nothing short of extraordinary. When I first joined the Qingshi company, stories about her were constantly circulating. Unparalleled adaptability, anti-hypnosis abilities, flawless disguises, and a knack for turning crises into opportunities. Back then, I admired her so much that I practically idolized her. I remember excitedly talking to my boss, by Song, about Shiva, passionately debating the details of her escape incidents and how she might spend her reward money. I had a strong premonition that the upcoming loop unraveling would be an extraordinary experience. During the ride, I sat silently in the passenger seat, afraid to say anything inappropriate that might make Longu change his mind and refuse to take me to meet Shiva. An hour later, we traveled from the city's southeast to its northwest. I obediently followed Longu like a child, step by step. He led me to a desolate commercial street and wandered around for a long time before finally entering a narrow alley. At the end of the alley stood an astronomical observatory with double glass doors. Is she inside? My heart raced uncontrollably. Yes, waiting for us, Longu nodded. The decor of the observatory resembled the aftermath of a raucous Halloween celebration. We passed a bow-tie-clad ostrich skeleton at the entrance, carefully avoided various sizes of burning candle jars on the floor, and arrived at a curtained floor-to-ceiling window with several single-seater sofas. The chandelier emitted a dim orange glow, which, contrasted with the pale green wallpaper and rust-colored tiles, created an eerie and somber atmosphere. It was evident there were 2 rooms here. Longu motioned for me to sit on a sofa. My gaze involuntarily darted toward the tightly closed small door nearby. A tiny flower spider, hanging from the doorframe, was shakily weaving a chaotic web. My heart pounded. I had seen photos of Shiva at Bai Song's place before. A tall, slender young woman with long black hair, dressed in black, with a delicate face and a sharp, commanding air. The door suddenly opened without warning. Startled, the spider scurried away, and someone stepped out. My anticipation, which had been building all the way, deflated the moment I saw the person clearly. It was a man in his 40s, with a bushy beard and dark skin, holding a deck of tarot cards. Longu pointed at him and introduced him succinctly. My teammate, Guggen. Guggen's presence instantly lowered the room's temperature. He scrutinized me coldly, a trace of mockery in his gaze. The analyst here to unravel the loops. I couldn't hide my disappointment and glanced at the tarot cards in his hand.
Yes.
Can you tell me if I'll succeed? Guggen smirked, a smile that was unsettling to behold.
He sat beside me.
I'm not so deluded as to use a deck to divine someone's fate. I can't even make sense of my own. He placed the cards on the table. Analysts go through training before starting, don't they? Training to detach from fear. You know quite a bit. Before we became escapees, we also underwent 6 months of training. But unlike yours, ours was about amplifying fear. That's when I lost my sense of time. An unprofessional irritation welled up in me. I didn't know why, but I didn't want to hear him talk about this. The Qingshi company repeatedly injected us with insulin. The insulin lowered our blood sugar, causing convulsions and comas. Each dose was near the lethal threshold, and then we'd be revived with glucose injections. During this process, we'd experience the sensation of dying over and over again. I couldn't suppress my shock. Guggen continued, and there's also the dizziness training. They strap you to a high-speed spinning machine, causing your brain to become engorged with blood. When you get off, it feels like your soul has been flung out of your body. That disorienting sense of separation between body and soul lasts for a long time. Many people couldn't endure this kind of torment, leading to severe psychological issues. I knew I couldn't let him dominate the conversation any longer, so I interjected at the right moment. And those who develop psychological issues are eliminated, right? Let's talk about. But Guggen picked up the thread again, sighing. Not just that. There are other things. In fact, under such conditions, no one can truly escape. I couldn't help but retort. What do you mean? Shiva is an exception. Guggen chuckled lightly. Shiva? Have you heard what happened to her after she claimed the reward? She vanished without a trace, as if she had never existed. I don't think she really escaped. There are no good people in Qingshi Company. Everyone there chews on human flesh like it's nothing. The life of an escapee is like a lone lamp in the mountain wind or dew on a blade of grass, gone in an instant. I couldn't agree with Guggen's words, but I couldn't deny they stirred something in me. Why indeed had there been no news of Shiva? In the files I got from Bai Song, the records only went up to the moment she stalled for time until the game ended. As I pondered this, an unusual sound came from outside the observatory. Longu, Guggen, and I all noticed it simultaneously. A crisp gunshot rang out just as Guggen tackled me to the ground. The ostrich skeleton by the door had its skull shattered by a bullet. It died a second death. In that urgent moment, Longu once again shattered my perception of environmental control. After the gunshot, iron grates suddenly dropped over the doors and windows of the observatory. I saw figures moving outside the door, and a trace of doubt crossed my mind. Was this some sort of error? Why did pursuers appear just as I, the analyst, arrived? And why did they resort to such extreme measures? Could it be that the reward for this round's secret treasure was so valuable that Qingshi Company couldn't afford to lose and would stop at nothing? As this thought crossed my mind, Guggen abruptly yanked me up. Are you just going to stand there and wait to die? Before I knew it, I was being dragged by Longu and Guggen out of the observatory through a hidden door in the small room. It suddenly dawned on me why the observatory was built at the end of the alley, because when you exited, you would find yourself in a different district. Something felt off. Everything happening in front of me was too illogical. Not just illogical, but rushed. The connections between events were sloppy, almost careless. A team that disregarded rules entirely suddenly chose to return to the system just when they could have broken free. Unidentified individuals tracked us down twice, shooting at me without hesitation. Longu invited me to join their team, and Guggen accepted me without question or discernment.
Why?
They didn't have to do any of this. What had compelled them to make these strange decisions? This seemingly chaotic sequence of events appeared to conceal some underlying order. I recalled Bai Song's warning before I set off. Never trust them. They're adept at hiding, both their movements and their intentions. If anything unexpected happens, don't panic. I'll be protecting you from a place you won't notice. Remember, this is just a game. Everything is part of the game. But after the two unexpected incidents just now, I started to doubt Bai Song's control over the situation. I even had a vague sense that there were many things in Qingshi Company that Bai Song didn't know about. These thoughts jumbled in my mind, forming a fragmented and uneven landscape, but I couldn't piece them together. For now, I had no choice but to follow them out. Guggen led the way, I walked in the middle, and Longu brought up the rear. As we moved, the two of them gave off an icy aura. Sandwiched between them, I felt as though I was wrapped in an eternal winter, frost ahead, frozen stillness behind. For the past 3 years, whenever insomnia struck, I would endlessly imagine where Longu and his team might be hiding. Even today, this remains my favorite way to fall asleep. I often pictured an apocalyptic bunker buried in the desert, an abandoned military base hidden in the forest, or an ancient karst cave deep in the mountains. I admit, these scenarios were a bit dramatic. But without such settings, I couldn't explain to myself how they managed to repeatedly vanish into thin air right under the public's gaze. This bedtime ritual came to an end today. In the busiest district of the city, on the most crowded street, stood a peculiar gray building. Shaped like an acute triangle, it occupied no more than 30 square meters of land, yet rose to 3 stories tall. It stood incongruously at the street corner, wrapped in tangled, withered vines and surrounded by the unending flow of traffic. Standing before the river of fast-moving cars, we waited about 15 minutes for a gap. Then Longu and Guggen briskly led me across the street and into a narrow alley in front of the triangular building. When I saw Longu confidently unlock the front door with his fingerprint, I found it hard to believe. This is your hideout? Yep. I made it here this easily? Just this easily. Inside, there was only one window, draped with thick blackout curtains. A single lamp illuminated the room, casting dim light. It took me a moment to adjust before I could make out my surroundings. The floor was made of thick black shipwood. Gray, understated French-style sofas sat low to the ground. The walls were painted in a worn red, streaked with scratches of varying depth. The room resembled an old mansion from a century ago, like something out of a movie. Longu and Guggen led me directly up to the third floor. The layout and decor were similar to the first floor. Underneath a floral crystal chandelier sat a long locust wood dining table. A thin, curly-haired woman was seated there, sipping tea. Hearing our approach, she turned to look at us. Longu introduced her simply. This is Gueji, another team member. Her reaction was entirely different from Longu and Guggen's when they met me. Her face twisted with fear and anger as she rushed to the open window and climbed onto its ledge. This, of course, caught me completely off guard. Gueji, visibly agitated, shouted, "You actually brought an outsider here. I told you if you brought her, I'd jump out the window." She pointed hysterically at a part of the room. "Have you forgotten how they died?" Following her gaze, I saw a shelf on the wall holding several memorial tablets. Black lacquer with gold-painted names adorned them, but the lettering was too small for me to read. Gueji screamed, "Longu, you've made the same mistake Shiva did, and you'll meet the same end." I couldn't help but ask, what mistake did Shiva make? Gueji froze for a moment before climbing down from the window and walking toward me. "You don't know?" she asked, then continued without waiting for my reply. She fell in love with an analyst. During that 6-month training period, he was her coach. He helped her survive many days when she almost couldn't go on. But in the end, she chose to trust that man, and the analyst hypnotized her. That's how she got caught. I stared at her. "How do you know that?" Ignoring my question, she sneered. "It's ridiculous, isn't it? Doesn't it sound like a death row inmate building their own gallows?" "Where is Shiva now?" I asked. She pondered for a moment. "I think she's already dead. This game was never designed for anyone to escape alive." Her voice trembled. "Maybe we're all dead. This house is just a refuge for the souls of escapees. Maybe we're all ghosts." She looked puzzled. If the dead could return, what would they do? Before I could answer, she suddenly flew into a frenzy again. She pointed accusingly at Longu, her eyes blazing with anger. "Longu, you're the one who killed us. We were hiding so well and you brought an analyst here? Are you planning to use this woman to get rid of us so you can keep the reward for yourself? How cruel." "No," she continued, her expression shifting to one of despair. "It's not cruelty. It's stupidity. You're so stupid, and now you've dragged us all down with you." She raved madly for a while, then broke into tears. "I can't die. My son is waiting for the reward money to save his life. We were so close to succeeding." She grabbed Longu's arm and pleaded, "At this critical moment, we can't risk exposure. With so much money at stake, even the faintest rumor will bring a tidal wave of pursuers. And when that happens, where will we hide amidst the thousands of blades and arrows? Longu, you can't be so foolish. You can't hand them the knife. Sweet-talking lies are the most dangerous of all." Gueji sobbed pitifully, as if her tears alone could solve everything. Longu and Guggen seemed used to this, letting her rage and cry without reacting or engaging. But I was completely unnerved by the scene. Gueji abruptly stopped crying, walked over to me and said, "Analyst, you seem scared." I replied honestly, "There's no seem about it." She chuckled, a dry laugh. "Don't fight it. Willpower alone can't drive fear away. It can only help you resist it. All that so-called bravery is just people masking their fear in front of others. Fear is fair. It's probably the fairest thing in the world. I believe it's the truest part of human nature." I scrutinized her. For a moment, I wanted to hypnotize her, to silence her completely. but it was just a fleeting thought. Gueji suddenly calmed down, looking at me with disdain. All these words are useless. You all go ahead and talk. I'll light some incense for everyone. She glanced back at me, her smile chilling. There's a place for you on the altar too. After all, we're all going to be ghosts someday. As Gueji lit incense for the memorial tablets, Gigan lit his pipe, exhaling a thin trail of smoke as he sighed. Analyst, you've seen quite the show today. Ghosts arguing with their own traitor. At this moment, real fear gripped me. It seeped from every pore of my body, thick and sticky, wrapping me completely in its suffocating embrace. Just as Gueji went to offer incense, a rustling sound came from the corner of the room. I turned toward the noise, and a small figure stood up from behind the dresser. Longu's voice remained calm. Team member Oysters. A boy, about 6 years old, wearing pajamas with cupcake patterns, shyly looked at me from a distance. Longu said you would come, but he didn't say which day. I've been waiting. I couldn't help but look at Longu in surprise. Is he also? Longu nodded. A child? How is that possible? This really exceeded my ability to understand. I hesitated and stammered. A real child. Gujen, puffing on his pipe, chuckled lightly. Did you think it was a dwarf? Look at those small arms and legs. They're all in proportion. Oysters, come over here and let your sister take a good look at you. Oysters obediently walked over and stood in front of me. I couldn't suppress my surprise. Why are you waiting for me? I mean, how did you know it was me coming? Oyster stared at his plush slippers, his long, dark eyelashes thick and full, and softly replied, Longu said, this matter is like a bottle of wine no one can open. Very troublesome. But you've come, so it's fine. You know how to drink it. Drink what wine? I didn't understand. Oysters looked up with certainty. Longu said you'll open this bottle of wine and drink it all in one go. I don't have that great a tolerance for alcohol. I turned to Longu. Honestly, I understand nothing about what's happening right now. Before Longu could respond, Gujen suddenly became agitated, impatiently raising his voice. No matter how clearly the guide speaks, it's useless if you can't tell north from south. Hearing this, Gueji suddenly collapsed on the ground, crying miserably. She was mumbling someone's name, her sobs choking her voice several times. She truly resembled a restless ghost, unwilling to leave the mortal world. Longu looked at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. Do you understand? Time is running out. There must be something that can't be torn, can't be broken, can't be forgotten, can't be avoided. What exactly are you talking about? I was growing more and more confused, starting to panic. At the same time, strange voices I wasn't supposed to hear suddenly filled my mind. Is there no trace left? Has everything disappeared? I clearly squeezed out every drop of fear from your heart. You're not an observer. You're a participant. Where is it hidden? Where? These voices, faint and distant yet clear enough to recognize, belonged to Baisong. Some memories rushed in all at once, then disappeared just as quickly, like uninvited old friends who appeared and vanished without warning. It felt like touching my old scars, but finding no way to heal them. Suddenly, I found myself trapped between shallow memories, but then I realized something important had indeed been forgotten. Why is she called Shiva? That powerful ascetic god, the god of self-conflict, the one who embodies contradictions. If the road to salvation is always empty, perhaps there is no road at all. Just as I thought this, Gueji's cries abruptly stopped. Her figure suddenly flashed from the altar, appearing between Longu and Gujen. I was so startled by this strange scene that I took a few steps back. Oyster stood before me, his eyes, usually filled with the confusion of a child, now sparkled with a strange light. He asked slowly, Shiva's self-conflict? I was completely lost, staring at him in shock. How do you know? I didn't say anything. Oysters looked at me. You don't need to say it. At that moment, Baisong's voice grew clearer, closer. Fu Ling, are you there? Before I could process why Bai Song's voice was in the room, something extraordinary happened to Oysters. His voice and appearance suddenly changed. His expression softened into something more feminine, and in just a few seconds, he turned into a little girl, a short-haired child standing in front of me. The little girl Oysters spoke loudly. Why would she have self-conflict? Could it be because she isn't a single self? What's happened to you? I wasn't even listening to what Oysters was saying. I was in a state of near collapse, unable to comprehend what was happening in front of me. Oysters looked at me oddly. Why are you afraid of your childhood self? Her voice was soft, calm, but suddenly I heard the howling of the wind. The small space beneath my feet suddenly became a junction between reality and illusion. Everything around me began to twist. I felt every blood vessel in my body tearing, the sound of a balloon popping echoing in my ears. Look behind you. After Oysters spoke these words, she vanished before my eyes like smoke. Then Long Gu, Guizhi, and Gu Zhen disappeared as well, leaving no trace. In the blink of an eye, a sudden sense of release from everything, an indescribable feeling of letting go, happened without warning. The fuzzy, illogical details of my memories suddenly became clear and vast. In the square, Bai Song was chasing. The bullet didn't hit the water cup, it hit Long Gu. In the Star Observatory, Bai Song broke through the door. The bullet didn't hit the ostrich skeleton, it hit Gu Zhen. In the sanctuary, Guizhi truly jumped from the building because Bai Song pointed a gun at her. On the altar, the inscriptions became clearer. The names were Long Gu, Gu Zhen, Guizhi. I slowly turned around, and this time I wasn't surprised. It was like someone singing a fisherman's song on a moonlit night. Like curling up in a warm quilt on a snowy day. Like seeing a familiar path after a long, lost journey. Shiva stood before me, long hair, black clothes, smiling faintly. It was a mirror. Then, everything in my vision darkened. Fulling, are you okay? Can you hear my voice? I opened my eyes to Bai Song's call. In front of me was a windowless basement. The surrounding furnishings resembled a hospital ward, with hospital beds and heart monitor machines. I realized I was sitting on a hospital bed, with a 4-drip stand beside me. The needle from the 4 was inserted into the back of my hand. Handsome Bai Song stood in front of me. The light from a floor lamp behind him cast a soft yellow glow, enveloping his figure and giving him an almost dreamlike, ethereal beauty. Bai Song, I said, looking at him slowly. Every time I see you, I feel happy. To me, you're like joy itself. Bai Song's expression softened as he handed me a bowl of medicine. Then take the medicine obediently. You've been lost in illusions again these past few days. This medicine will help you break free from them. I frowned as I took the medicine and drank it, sighing, still so bitter. Bai Song smiled, but it will treat your illness. I slumped. Did I fail my mission? Did they succeed? Did they get the infallible ring? Bai Song's gaze fell on my hand where the 4 was inserted. He paused for a moment. Would you like to know what ingredients are in this medicine? He sat next to me. Longu 15 grams, Fulling 15 grams, Muley 20 grams, Gagan 10 grams, Guizhi 10 grams. My breath caught, and I abruptly looked up at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. Bai Song looked at me with a trace of pity. The names of those team members, when combined, form a prescription for treating hysteria. I told you this prescription a long time ago, but you gave the names of people you imagined up, including yourself, the name Fulling. What? You're not the analyst of the game. 5 years ago, when I found you, you were wandering on the streets in a delirious state. No one knew your original name. There was no huge prize game, no Chingstone Gaming Company. He looked at me, only Chingstone Psychiatric Hospital. And I'm not your superior, but your attending doctor. I stared at him in shock. You invented everyone and their tragic pasts, he said, tenderly stroking my hair. Poor girl, I really don't know what you went through to create such a terrifying story. He took my hand. Someone as beautiful and delicate as you. Shouldn't you have grown up wearing princess dresses and listening to fairy tales? My body trembled slightly as I murmured his words. Why did I invent such a terrifying story? Everything that's been troubling you has no meaning. You need to let go of them to remember your real past. Do you want to know who the real you is? I lowered my head. I don't care. I like the name Fulling, especially when you say it.
Bai Song sighed.
But I care, Fulling. I like you. You have no idea how much I want you to get better. You're so cute. I've never seen anyone as beautiful and cute as you. I want to heal you, and then... He cupped my face with his hands and kissed my cheek. Then I will propose to you. He gestured around us. Look, I've decorated a ward at home just because I like you. I brought you here to take care of you. The hospital environment was too noisy, and you'd easily be affected by other patients. Fulling, I've done so much for you. Don't let me down. I looked at him with that sorrowful expression, and my heart was filled with guilt. What should I do to let go of these illusions? How can I find myself? Maybe you should finish the story you created. You've never told me the whole story, he said gently, hugging my shoulders. Remember? You once confessed to me. I looked into his eyes. His gaze was sincere, no, almost devout, like a novice waiting to complete the rites before a Buddha statue, cautiously waiting for the ceremony to end, afraid of making a mistake. I hesitated and looked at him. I confessed to you? Not just once. Did you agree or reject me? I agreed. I suddenly felt moved. Would you really marry me? I would. My eyes welled up with tears. Okay, then I'll finish the story. Bai Song stared at me. Who is the real keeper of the ring in this story? Longu. Bai Song showed visible shock, muttering, Longu. It's actually Longu. He suddenly stood up a little out of control. I always thought it was Fulling. His voice turned stiff. So, Longu died with the key? I stared at him blankly. No, before he died, he told Fulling the key. Bai Song sat back down and took my hand again. And then, did Fulling take the key and go to retrieve the treasure? What was the key Longu told her? He smiled lightly. This plot you set up is really interesting. I wonder what you imagine the key to be. He embraced me again. Darling, I'm really curious. Please keep going. I licked my lips, and so, I decided to let everything in the story return to its original course. Fulling finally remembered that she wasn't the game analyst. She was also one of the escapees of the infallible ring. However, initially, she did want to be an analyst for Chingstone Company. This intention started when she was 20. That year, she met a man who made her heart flutter. He was an executive at Chingstone Company and also the head of the hunters and analysts in the escape game. Fulling wanted to spend more time with the man she liked, so she worked hard to learn all the courses to become an analyst, especially psychology. Her psychology tutor once praised her as a genius in hypnosis. Years later, everything was ready. Just as she was about to apply for a position at Chingshire Company, the man she liked suddenly proposed to her. Refin was overjoyed and immediately accepted. After spending a wonderful night together, the man shared a bold plan. Chingshire Company was about to launch an extravagant chase and escape game called The Unattainable Ring. He suggested Refin apply to be one of the escapees, with him offering help and providing information along the way. Once she won the grand prize, they would leave together and live happily off the prize money. Refin agreed, as the game required 4 escapees. She invited 3 of her friends, Longu, who needed money to pursue his art, Guizhi, who was struggling with her son's medical bills, and Gujen, who had a chronic illness and wanted to provide for her family. With the insider help from her boyfriend, Refin and her friends smoothly passed the selection process and became the final escapees. Once the chase and escape game began, her boyfriend, acting as an insider, provided more precise and timely information. This was why their team always managed to escape capture and stay one step ahead. In the end, they succeeded in evading capture long enough to win the game. When they were about to retrieve the unattainable ring from the bank using the key, Refin paused and gasped. Is this all new? Did I get to this point in the story before? Bai Song shook his head eagerly. No, keep going. She tried to catch her breath, feeling dizzy as if suffocating, and whispered, I'm not sure how, but it's hard to remember where I left off. She lay back on the bed, closing her eyes. I think I need to sleep for a while. Bai Song frowned, muttering, maybe the 4 is going too fast. After a pause, he turned off the drip and reassured her. Don't worry, you'll feel better soon. Sitting by her side, he stared at her intently. Refin, do you feel better? Can you continue? Yes, a little, she mumbled weakly, her voice faint. The key is... Bai Song leaned closer, eager. What is it? What is the key? Just as he moved closer, Refin suddenly opened her eyes and stared into his, every word deliberate. The key is... Bai Song's pupils dilated in shock, his body freezing. Refin reached out and patted his cheek, smiling. It's your anchor point. For the past 3 years, I've constantly felt like I was on the verge of madness. Every time I neared the edge of collapse, I had to force myself to stop from falling off. What right did I have to lose my mind? I hadn't paid for my foolishness, my selfishness, my gullibility. I hadn't avenged those who were murdered. Guizhi was right. Connections that can't be cut will always come with a reckoning. I stared at myself in the mirror, or rather, at us. Longu, Gujen, Guizhi, those names were the ones I gave them through that prescription. Under the influence of the drugs, I had forgotten their real names and I had forgotten mine as well. The only ones I truly remembered were Bai Song and Shiva. Shiva, she was crucial. When Bai Song finally regained his senses from the drugged state, I had already tied him to the bed with the same handcuffs and like irons he had used to restrain me for the past 3 years. I'd also inserted the 4 needle into his hand. Bai Song looked at me in disbelief. Refin, you hypnotized me? How did you do that? He spoke with horror. For these 3 years, you've been conscious? I bit into the apple he had prepared for me, chewing slowly, surprised. You thought I was under your control with drugs and hypnosis the whole time? That I wouldn't be aware? Bai Song fell silent, unsure of how to respond. I quickly finished the apple and wiped my mouth. Remember? You once told me that someone skilled in martial arts would never throw an empty punch. In psychology, the most vulnerable moment is when a person feels the most superior. That's when you're most easily manipulated. Bai Song's eyes widened in realization. You planted an anchor in my subconscious all along. I nodded, pleased. Yes, 83 times. I spent 3 years preparing, waiting for the perfect opportunity to hypnotize you in an instant. After all, you're a hypnosis master. If I didn't succeed the first time, I would have been finished. Bai Song's eyes seemed to burn with fury, and his gentle demeanor faded completely. I looked at him. Darling, why aren't you smiling anymore? Before he could respond, I stopped smiling and my voice grew cold. Good people smile, but you're not a good person. What's there to be angry about? You also planted an anchor in my subconscious. Every time you said you liked me, you were beginning to hypnotize me. I checked the restraints once more to make sure they were secure. Though they seemed fine, I wrapped thick tape around him just to be safe. I turned off the 4 to make sure he wouldn't fall asleep before I finished speaking. I sat before him and said, Bai Song, all these years, you've hypnotized every persona within me. But you never figured out where the key is, did you? Why? He growled, his voice tense with fury. Because none of the personas you encountered knew what the key was. Bai Song finally let out a low, angry shout. That's impossible. I raised my hand, pinching my thumb and forefinger together. You were so close to the key. How close? I turned the 4 back on, increasing the speed, watching as the drug slowly weakened him. When you wake up, someone will tell you. Bai Song fell into a deep sleep, and I propped his phone against a stack of books, opening the camera. Many years later, in a psychology lecture at a university, an elderly professor with graying hair analyzed a famous case of dissociative identity disorder for his students. He spent half the class explaining the strange experiences of the patient, and at the end, he spoke with excitement. It was because of this dissociative identity disorder patient that the live-action chase and escape game, which had been popular for 30 years, was cancelled. All similar entertainment programs were deemed illegal. The famous Qingshi game company went bankrupt, and its executive, Bai Song, was sentenced to death for murder and fraud. This patient collected the prize money and divided it into 3 equal portions, which were given to the families of Longgu, Guizhi, and Guzhen. After that, no one knew where she went. The reason I've been particularly interested in the progress of this case is that I have a deep connection with this patient. She used to sit in this very classroom as a student of mine for 4 years. At the time, I told everyone that she was the most talented hypnotist I had ever seen. Later, she became the only dissociative identity disorder patient I have ever met who was able to perform self-hypnosis. The patient's initial symptoms probably began during her 6 months of mental training at Qingshi Company. After she was betrayed by her lover and witnessed the brutal deaths of her teammates without being able to stop them, the intense mental trauma of guilt and hatred triggered the symptoms of dissociative identity disorder. When this patient developed dissociative identity disorder, she had a strong subconscious desire to protect the secret key, so her subconscious mind created the personalities of her teammates to help guard the key. Bai Song was also a hypnosis expert, but during the 3 years he kept this patient captive, no matter how many times he tried to hypnotize her, he couldn't uncover the secret key. That's because the personalities the patient split into were quite unique. These personalities didn't just replace the fallen teammates. Each of them had their own specific role. Longgu was the leader, Guzhen was the discerner, Guizhi was the stimulator, and Oysters was the patient's original personality. Normally, all the personalities were muddled and did not interact, but when the right moment arrived, all the personalities recognized that it was the perfect time for revenge. At that moment, they would form a subconscious connection. Longgu, Guzhen, Guizhi, and Oysters trusted each other, and together, they opposed the one personality that had been under Bai Song's control, Refin, who deeply loved and trusted Bai Song. Thus, through the recreation of the final moments of each teammate's death, they slowly revealed the truth to Refin. When Refin finally woke up, the young Oysters would grow into the integrator and merge all the personalities. At this point, the most powerful personality would emerge. She was the true guardian of the ring, Shiva. The classroom erupted in continuous applause. The professor smiled and gestured for quiet with his hand. To end this class, let's watch a video of a statement that was uploaded to an internet platform by Shiva herself. It was this statement that led to the results I just described. The professor pressed a button, and the large screen began to play the video. On the screen, in a dimly lit basement, a graceful woman in black looked briefly at the unconscious man bound to the bed behind her. Then, she turned around, moved a chair in front of the camera, sat down straight, and spoke calmly. "I just want to use ordinary words to tell this past, and after finishing, I hope my emotions will remain calm." She paused, then continued, "I have only one expectation for this story, to express it truthfully and accurately.